I would love to. Never before in our lifetime has our faith in a risen Lord been more severely put to the test.
I don't know if anybody can appreciate how radicalizing it is to have had all this theological training as I've had for, my goodness, I have been in college 12 years studying. And then to sit with a young man of 26 who is literally struggling to hang on to life at all costs, and to have him say to you, Bernard, do you believe in the resurrection?
I am thinking of Keith MacDonald, who is 26 and struggling with full-blown AIDS for the past 2 years now. Recently, he has been most seriously ill, and so it is not surprising that much of his thoughts are on the hereafter.
Well, after I spoke with you, and you mentioned that I should have some hope. I thought about it and I calmed down. You know, I did have 104 fever. I had it all day, and I wasn't thinking too clearly. But it did give me pause to think and once again accept the possibility that there's hope. And when you came and gave me communion that one time, I was also very comforted. I felt part of a community of people that could love me, did love me, and I understood perhaps what people mean by the body of Christ in that sense, and it's something that I hope for. And I don't know if I can concretely go to my death, expecting whatever to happen. I'll just have hope. The community of people here, I think there's a basic faith and sincerity that makes it real, as opposed to the Catholic priest who came in and gave me sacrament of the sick when I was in the hospital. It was just why up dab, and here's a cross, thank you. And I appreciated it, but as Thor was saying, it just didn't seem to have the spark that should be there.
Thor Wood is a married man with 2 grown children. He also has full-blown AIDS.
I think of the chaplain who was in the hospital, chaplain to the hospital at the time I was hospitalized with my pneumonia. He needed spiritual help so much worse than I did. He was in really such sad shape spiritually that he could help me in not one whit, not one way. It is enough to make me angry that there's such spiritual poverty among people who should be helping, who should be in a position to give real guidance and sustenance, which is what Bernard does so magnificently.
From my experience of gay people and in the gay community, it is quite probably one of the most terrible forms of loneliness that can be experienced by any human being. Because the order of the heart is reversed for the gay person. Her and his society presume that heterosexuality is the norm. And everything in church and state militates in favor of that. So that the young little boy or girl who is beginning to experience their sexuality in, say, pubescence, adolescence, and that sexuality expresses itself in attraction to the same gender. Because mommy and daddy, with the best of intentions very often, and the church and the society say, you don't exist. Or if you do exist, this is abnormal. The gay person is frighteningly alone. Many people that I have dealt with in my psychotherapy practice, they tell me when they first discovered they were gay, they used to pray to God. Please, God, don't let me be a faggot. Let me be like my pal John or my pal Jimmy, because they want so much to fit in. They want so much to belong. They want so much to please their God as they perceive their God. I have found Jesus in a way that I have never found Jesus before. I have seen the gospel lived out. Not indeed out of any conscious awareness on these people's part very often that they were in fact living the gospel, that they were in fact being Jesus Christ in the flesh. But you know, when you see someone whose lover has been diagnosed with AIDS, and you see him stand by his friend against the condemnation of his church and family very often, and at the risk of losing his own life, you see a faithfulness to a human person that only God is capable of. Homosexuality is as ancient as civilization itself. It is unnatural for a homosexual man to go to bed with a woman. That is unnatural. And that happens again and again in the church. And the pain and suffering that I have encountered in heterosexual women who have, quote, mistakenly married a gay man. Some of them now coming down with AIDS and their children because they have been true to the natural teaching of the church, quote unquote, is outrageous. It's a crime against humanity. And that's what we do by our presumption that society is heterosexual, that God is heterosexual. It is simply not true. Anywhere, everywhere, in all civilizations across the centuries, there were homosexual people. And the unnatural thing about homosexuality is to be forced into heterosexuality, as indeed it is unnatural for a heterosexual to be forced into homosexuality.
And the hard knowledge for us who love our church is that one of the principal elements of the oppression of this community is their rejection by the very church they also attempt to maintain loyalty to, the church they also love.
As a person with AIDS, I travel around the AIDS community as a PWA, and I wind up in a Lutheran church at City Corp where there's a dinner once a week. There's an Episcopal church where there's another dinner for PWAs. There's another church where the PWA coalition meets, Episcopal. There's no Catholic churches. The AIDS Vigil, opening Gay Pride Day, was held outside of a church, a Roman Catholic church, St. Veronica's, which is the village's parish church. It was closed shut, and there were sick people on Christopher Street that night, and it was hot. It was oppressively hot. It does very bad things for sick people to be out there without a seat. We had to stand in the street. Meanwhile, tax-exempt property was closed to us. They wouldn't even offer that service.
The reality of the situation is, does the church throw out married people because some married people commit adultery? Does the church throw out married people because married people use contraception that is widely known? You know, I mean, there's no logic to what's been done here to homosexual people, whether they are celibate or not. The church, again and again, uses gay people as scapegoat for sin. You know, we had to have our Easter services for people with AIDS in Jim's apartment because there was no room for us in any inn. And there I was with all of these people sweating our hearts out, crammed in this apartment, having to call up PWAs, persons with AIDS, before I went to do the service to tell some of them, don't come, because there won't be enough room. Jesus, you know, where are you here in this? You know, if people, you know, I've said if I could just take the Pope by the hand for one day and bring him around to just listen and see what's going on here, I believe he would be converted to the Christ that is present in our midst. Christ's message in AIDS is this, I think. In our joy, God whispers. In our pain, God shouts. And as a Christian, I believe, although I do not always understand, that the love of God is our ultimate environment. It is what we are made from, and it is what we are made for. And in AIDS, God is shouting to us to love our God-given sexual human condition, and to love in particular those who are different, and to stop fag bashing in his name. And the only way we can learn from AIDS is to be humble enough to listen with our hearts to what's going on. And we will be converted, I'm convinced, to the message of God in Jesus. It is for the heart that God is God. And many of us don't even have our hearts to begin with. But when one is faced with death, which our society celebrates into total denial, we are faced with ultimate mystery. And we are faced with our own mortality in a way that is frightening. AIDS will convert the church. The church will be judged on AIDS. I have an ongoing love affair with God that is so extraordinarily ordinary. That's one of the things that I have had to let go of. That God is so human, you know? That instead of my flesh being a separation between God and I, it's in fact the incarnation of God and I. And in this is my freedom in love, not that I love, but that I am loved. And I'm loved with a love that is beyond all telling. And when I enter into the powerlessness of a man who works with people who are dying, I know that they're all right. Because I know through my own oppression that I'm all right. What has happened to me in accepting my own limitations, in accepting my own weakness, in accepting my own brokenness, is that in that acceptance I have most truly found that God can be God. You know, when I am weak, then God is strongest. It's when I'm on my knees, doubting almost into despair sometimes. And yet, in that hellish struggle, God comes through and, as it were, kisses me on the cheek and says, Bernard, you're okay. And it's a very, 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 very tender thread. You're okay, Bernard, because I love you.